Hello, welcome back. In the previous videos of Azure Data Factory series, so we have seen introduction to Azure Data Factory, and also we have seen how to create a data factory and how to navigate basic navigation of data factory, right? So today in this video, so we will concentrate and discuss about pipelines, Azure Data Factory pipelines and activities, and we will see this with demo as well at the end. Basically, we'll understand at the beginning of the this video, we will understand what is pipelines in Data Factory in detail and what are the activities that we can see in the Azure Data Factory pipeline. And later we can see that in the demo and we can visually see how the pipeline and Azure Data Factory activities which are related, I mean the pipelines and activities are related with each other. So what is the relationship between them, right? So yeah, before proceeding, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, I would recommend you to subscribe for this channel and please share with the colleagues and the friends who are interested to learn regarding Data Factory or regarding anything about data engineering with Azure or in general data engineering concepts, right? So let's get started. So let us understand what are the basic components of Azure Data Factory. So as we are starting with the basics in any topic that we take. So in Azure Data Factory, the series of video that you're seeing, so basically we will discuss from the scratch, right? So when we start with Azure Data Factory, so the most common words that we hear is pipeline, dataset, link service, and integration runtime, which is also called as IRE. So these are the very basic components that you will hear when you're learning Azure Data Factory. And in this video, we will discuss basic definition. I mean, what these each components mean and what they are used for, and what is the relationship between all these. Basically, there is a relationship between all these. There is a relationship between pipeline and dataset. There is a relationship between dataset and link service, and there is a relationship between link service and integration runtime. So that we will discuss in this video in detail. Right. So let's go in the next slide. So as you can see here, it is a high level depiction of the relationship between pipeline, activity and dataset. But before going that, so let us understand what is a data factory pipeline. So pipeline is nothing but you are creating a sequence of activities. That means that the set of activity that are logically grouped together is called a data factory pipeline. That means whenever you want to do certain activity, like you are doing a ETL activity, you are doing a ELT activity, or you are doing some data processing, right? So you need a series of activity to actually do that, right? And to perform that particular task. So if you are performing a task of, say, you want to bring the data from a SQL DB to your data lake, or you want to bring the data from your Oracle database to the blob storage. So this is the activity that you are performing. And for that particular activity, what are the data sets? I mean, what are the activities you need, right? So this is a sequence of activities so that you will use to create one pipeline. So that's what this picture depicts here. So at a high level, what you see is a pipeline, and inside pipeline, you will see a set of activities. One pipeline can have a number of activities to perform a certain job. And that job, as I explained, it can be onboarding of any data, or it can be pushing a data to a blob storage, or pulling a data from a, say, data lake. So it can be any data engineering activity or ETL or ELT activity. So that set of activities we can club it and to perform a task, a logical task, and call it as a pipeline. And what is activity, right? So activity is actually a pipeline defined action. The activities in a pipeline define actions to perform on your data. So as we mentioned, each pipeline can have a number of activity. It can be like a copy activity. It can be a store procedure. It can be a lookup that you are doing, right? So it might be a if condition, or it may be a like switch condition kind of a scenario. So there are like n number of activities that we can see in the demo basically. But at a high level, so this is the pipeline and this is the activity that we see. And in this video, we will concentrate on pipeline and activity. But at a high level, activities actually, I mean, each activity I mean, it consumes the data set, one data set, and produces a number of output to the data set back, right? So, but data set we will see in detail in the upcoming videos. But in this video, let us concentrate on pipeline and activity first, right? Uh, but at a high level, hope you understood, pipeline is dependent on activity and activities. So not all activities are dependent on dataset. So that is why dataset will be used only in certain cases. Like if you can see, like Hive activity is there, stored procedure activities there, copy activity is there. So only certain activities will actually need a dataset. Few other activities, like if you are using if condition, if you are using a wait condition, so like wait activity, if you are using a web activity, so those might not necessarily need a dataset. What I mean to say is, Dataset is not a mandatory. In a few cases, only when it is needed for certain use cases where we want to connect it to a particular source system or target system. So then only we might need a dataset. Okay, but pipeline, when there is a pipeline, activity is a mandatory. A pipeline should have at least one activity. So then only it can be a pipeline. But activity can have an interlinked dataset or it might not have based on the use case, so that we can see in the upcoming slides. So hope this is clear, and this is very important to understand the hierarchy, right? So at a high level hierarchy, the pipeline will come and then activity will come and then root level, your dataset will come. Hope this dependency is understood. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide where we will see activity grouping. So we understood what are, I mean, one pipeline can have a number of activities, right? So in activities, there are different kind of activities. So that is very important to understand what are the different types of activities at a high level, how they are divided, right? So as you can see, first important or most commonly used activity is copy activity. So here, so this is also called as a data movement activity. The reason why we call it as a data movement activity is we actually move the data or lift and shift the data from one location to another location. And during that, we can do a lot of file conversions, like from Parquet to Avro or Avro to Parquet, or you can consume a table and store it in a Parquet format. So basically, on the fly, you can do a lot of data level like conversions. So that is what we call it as a data movement activity. And next is a data transformation activity. So once the data is moved, if you think about ETL scenario, right, your data has to be moved from one location to another location, that is extract, and then you do a transformation. Definitely you will have a transformation use case if you are performing any data engineering projects. So then you will have activities like data flow, Azure functions. So Azure function is specifically where you're using APIs, right? A data flow, it will be useful when you're doing a lot of join kind of activities where you do not write a code for that kind of joins. And logic app is again for every action you can create a trigger. So logic app is not specific to any certain use case. It has a lot of things inside it. If you are aware of Power Apps, it is very similar to Power Apps. There will be action, and you can trigger a lot of triggers based on that particular action. So say for example, you can create a if you're receiving a mail to your mailbox, so based on that mail, you can trigger a particular action. Say that bring the particular attachment to the blob storage. So similarly, you can connect to like a lot of connectors are there and other things, but yeah, so this is basically used for that. And then Databricks notebook is if you are using a Databricks, Azure Databricks in your workspace. I mean, there's a workspace for that Azure Databricks created. So you can write a code like PySpark or Python, Scala, or so any kind of programming language that you can prefer writing for the data transformation, and you can connect those Databricks notebook in your data factory. And similarly, if you're using on-premise Hadoop Echo space, so then you can use a Hive, Big, MapReduce, Spark kind of thing. And if you're writing a custom USQL code, if you want to write, then you can use a USQL activity. So these are basically, if you can see, in all these activities, basically what we are doing, we are using these activities to perform a data transformation. That means the data is getting changed from one form to another form, or you are doing a sequence of like you're writing some queries, right? And changing the like you're joining particular tables and all, right? So that's where we call it as a data transformation. And next is a control. So this is nothing to do with the data, right? So it will not act on a data. These two are like data movement and data transfer, but this is a supporting activities. Basically, if you want to use a if condition, or that we call it as a if activity. If you want to use a loop in your code, right, you can use a for each activity. So if you want to use like want to create some delay, you can use a wait activity. So there are a lot of control activities. So we have just mentioned a few important activities here, but in the demo I'll try to show I mean how many activities that are available, and definitely Microsoft keeps adding more activities with its new releases. So yeah, next let us go to the demo part. So in the demo, what we'll be expected to see is we will see how to create a data factory pipeline, and what are the different activities in the activity pane, and like design pane is there, and there is a properties section. So there is a settings, and there is a pipeline level parameters, and there are pipeline level variables. And so basically in whatever the Azure Data Factory pipelines we are creating, it will be stored in a JSON format. We will see how it is actually stored in a JSON format and what is the advantage of it, or like what is the benefit of uh, storing it in a JSON format, especially in the CI/CD or deployment purpose. And there are activities dependency, like how can we create a dependency between activities, right? So that also we can see, and you can see nested activities, activity within an activity. So if you are having a if condition, in the if condition you can create a copy activity or any other activity, right? So that becomes an activity inside activity. So then finally we can see how do we schedule the pipelines to run on a specific day or something, or we can manually trigger the pipeline and see how it runs, and also we can debug it. There's a debug option when you want to when you are working as a developer, you want to try something and all, right? So there is a debug and trigger option. So these are the details are expected to see in the demo, right? So now let us understand how do you create a pipeline. So whenever you are into Azure portal and you navigate to the Azure Data Factory, that you can see in the previous video how to navigate to this Data Factory screen. But like when we land to this Data Factory page, this is a home. As you can see, this is a home pane. In the home blade, basically you'll be able to see like a code repository and other details that we have explained in the previous video. I don't want to go in that, but now if you want to create a pipeline, so you have to go to the author. So this is where there's a pencil icon here. If you click on this, you will come to the author, and as you can see here, there are pipeline category, and there is a dataset category, data flow category, and power query category, right? So first, let us see how do we create a pipeline. Let us understand, right? So now, if you click on these three dots, okay, you can see an option where there it says new pipeline, or you can just click on here. It says pipeline, and here also you can see option of pipeline. So either ways, you can choose to create a pipeline. Okay? So once you click on pipeline, so it'll come with some default name that you can change to any name of your choice. So I'm just naming it as a PL demo, right? And so this is just you are giving a PL demo here as a name, and you want to, like, I'm just putting one dummy activity just for a demo purpose. So just putting a wait activity, so it just creates some delay because as I mentioned, every pipeline, each pipeline should have one or more activity, at least one activity is needed, right? So just created one activity, and once it is done, so there are two options. One option is to debug, another option is to trigger. So when you debug it, so the unsaved or unpublished, so publish option is what saves your code to the data factory. Currently, if you see the whatever changes you have made, it is not saved to the data factory. That's why it is showing, it is asking us to publish. And also here you can see a dot. Okay, so this dot will disappear when you save it, right? So since it is not saved, if you just try to trigger it, so it won't take as you can see, pipeline is not found because it is unless and until it is published, so it won't be able to we are not we will not be able to run it or trigger it. So instead what you can do is you can debug anytime. So is uh, debug will run the pipeline which is unsaved but which is already changed. So that is the major difference between a debug and trigger, right? So trigger will keep in mind, trigger will only work on the published code, but debug will work on the current code which is in the browser cache that you have made the change. So once I publish it, as you can see, let us try to publish it and then check whether the trigger option is enabled. So now it is, you can see here, it is saying publishing. Okay, let's wait for that. And once it is published, so let me try to trigger it. So now if you see, there is an option to trigger. You can click on trigger and it just triggers the pipeline. So hope you are able to understand what is the difference between debug and trigger, right? And one more important thing to note is when you debug, it'll show in the output pane here. Okay, but when you trigger, it can be only seen in the monitor tab. So as you can go in the monitor tab, once you go in the monitor tab, it shows triggered. And also if you want to see the debug code, so you can click on debug. So that's a difference, right? So hope you have understood the difference between debug and trigger for a particular pipeline. So now let us understand the basic what you see in the screen. This is a pipeline data factor screen, right, that you are seeing. Let us understand the different piece and parts what you are seeing here, right? The first part, as we have mentioned here, this is basically where you see resources, factor resources pane, what we can call it as, and you can see all the pipeline, data set, data flow, power queries, and all. And you can create a pipeline data set here, and also you can create a folder like a folder and organize them in a particular folder. As you can see, this particular pipelines have come into the particular folder. So this is a use of factory resources pane. So the next pane is the activities pane. Okay. So this is the most used pane, I would say, like where we see most of the items. As you remember, we have discussed data movement or data transfer activities, and the copy activities was the main thing, right? That we have discussed. So this is where we see a copy activity, and data flow is also one of the move and transfer data transfer and data movement activity that you can see. And apart from that, as we discussed, there are activities specific to data transformation. So let us see what are the activities specific to data transformation. For that, as you can see, Databricks, as we mentioned, you can use write a custom code in Python, Scala, and R programming, right? So there we will call the Azure Databricks from here. So in that case, you'll be using a Databricks. And also you'll be using a HD Insight where we use Hive, Big, Spark and all. So all, these are all also used for data transformation. And also you can use a machine learning, Azure machine learning. You can call those experiments or batch programs that you want to run. So all these are Databricks, HD Insight, what you see, and machine learning. And also there should be something called as USQL if I'm not wrong. Let me try that. Yeah, so in the data analytics, it should be there. Yeah, as you can see, USQL, right? So this is also a data transformation activity. So these are all data transformation activities. Okay. So now let us see the other details, right? I mean, other activities that are like you can call it as a control activities, right? So like you can see general, right? So these are like there are a lot of activities as you can see here. So if you want to discuss the basics, like append variable is used to append two variables or append some one variable to some timestamp or something like that, right? And delete activity can is used to delete some file or something like that. And execute pipeline. So using this pipeline, you can call another pipeline from the parent pipeline. So I am in the PL demo. Now if I want to call PL is equal to blob from this, I can just use this activity and call that pipeline. So that the parent is calling the child pipeline. It is a basically nested, it creates the nested pipelines. And this is for executing SSIS package. And this is for like if you are want to create some fail activity, right? So just want to give some like error message if something fails and with some error code. So basically we can use this activity, but it's not mostly most commonly used. But most commonly used, I would say, is like a get metadata and lookup, right? And the store procedure and set variable. And yeah, these are the most commonly used. So get metadata will get the information about any file system or any say database tables, right? Or any especially it will be used for like file system where you want to get the metadata information of a particular folder or particular file, right? So once you configure it, and as I mentioned, this will need a data set. So you have to connect to a data set like on a particular blob storage or ADLS or any file system, right? So that's where you'll be able to use this. And lookup activity is just to kind of do a lookup on a particular table data or store procedure data. Right? And store procedure is used to call a store procedure in a SQL DB basically, or any database for that matter. Okay. And set variable is used to like at a pipeline level, if you can see, you can create a variables and parameters. So it is nothing but in a programming, any programming language, if you are creating a parameters, so and variables, so you should be knowing the difference between the parameter and variables. So variables uh, will change, can change over the course of the execution, but parameters is the parameter will remain constant. So that's the whole idea. But a variable, if I define some variable here, I can set that variable within the pipeline with any value for that matter, right? So suppose if I create a test, okay, variable, and this test variable here it will populate, and then I can set any variable. Like I can like call a system function like date function. So I can add a current date here and something like that. Okay, or I can add some additional addition of 1 + 1 or something. There are a lot of functions basically, as you can see here. You can use a like a date function, logical functions, math function, and all those string functions. Yeah, you want to concat a string or get like an index of last index of. Okay, split the string, substring. So there are a lot of activities that you can perform, functions that you can perform basically, and set a particular variable. Okay, and wait is to cause some delays. If you want to cause some delay for some reason, like you can cause a delay of 10 seconds. It is in particularly in seconds, right? So these are the most basically most basic activities will be used. Control activities we would say, and there are other activities if you want to use call the HTTP REST API request based request, then you can use web activity and webhook, right? So these are the most commonly used, and apart from these, other commonly used I would say is if condition and for each. Yeah. So if condition, as you know, like any other programming language, you just give an expression here. So expression can be anything that can give the result as true or false. Suppose you can give a particular variable, like as I said, right? So test, like I can give a pipeline parameter, like say param1, and say it as x, right? And in if condition, what I can say is I can give a equals. I can use the equals function here, right? And then say comma x. Okay. So coming back here, basically what I'm telling here is let me get a single state. So this particular param1, if it is equal to x, so then what happens is this equals, as you can see here, I'll just try to search this. Just a moment, yeah. So as you can see, it returns true or false. True if two values are equal, or it returns a false. So in this case, it is returning a true. So that's where this expression will turn true and your true condition will execute. So whatever inside you place in the true condition, so that is going to execute. Hope this is clear, right? So that's how the if condition works. And coming to the for each loop, so it is also like any other programming language. You just give a for each, like if you're writing a Python code or Java code, what you need to give for a for each is you need to give an array, right? So here also you need to give an array value. Okay, that array value can come from anywhere, but just for example, I can show you. You can pass array for from your like pipeline also, right? So here I can just give a pipeline param array, and here the array should always be in the bracket braces, square braces, and it can be a single quotes value which is separated by comma, something like this, right? So in this case, what happens is this array can be taken into a for each loop. I can show you that. Yeah, as you can see, it can consider array. Okay, but if I try to give something which is not array, then definitely it is going to show a warning here. So that's where for loop is taking an array value. So these are the basic uh, activities that we wanted to show in this as part of the demo, right? And as you can see, we want to show one more important concept here. Whenever you create any pipeline, right? So this is a basically it is a drag and drop feature, but internally in the background, when you publish here, it will go and save to the data factory in the form of JSON. How do you see what is a JSON? So you can just click here to see the JSON code representation of this source, and you can see the same code. It will be converted into a code basically. The same design what we created, it will be converted into code. Like it is a nested JSON format. And if you are very good in JSON, you can directly do a changes here, okay, and then say click on OK. But like if you are a beginner, we won't recommend you to work on this JSON format directly, right? So, and this JSON format, like this code will be used if you want to migrate your code from the development environment to test environment or test to production. So this code will be converted into something called as ARM template, Azure Resource Manager template, and that will be used for the deployment. So your code in the background, data factory code in the background will be maintained and deployed in the form of JSON. So hope this is clear. So this is very important, right? To understand. And so as you can see, we can also have an option to create a nested uh, activities. So what when I say nested activities, so activity within an activity. So inside for each loop, I can create a if condition, right? So I have a pipeline here. As you can see, I'm in the PL demo, and in the pipeline, I have a for each loop. Inside for each loop, I'm creating a if condition. So this is nothing but we are creating a nested activities. Okay. So similar way, we can create a nested pipelines, as I was mentioned, right? So you can call another pipeline. Say I have SQL to blob pipeline, right? From PL demo, I'm calling the pipeline SQL PL SQL blob. Then this becomes a PL demo becomes your parent, and PL SQL blob will become your child pipeline. Hope this is clear, right? And let us understand that how do we schedule the pipeline once everything we complete, right? So then how do we schedule a pipeline? So to schedule a pipeline, you can go to trigger and click on new and edit. So in the Azure Data Factory, we don't call it as a schedule, we call it as a trigger. But once you click on trigger now, it is a manual trigger. But when you click on new and edit, then you click on new and create a trigger, then it will be a scheduled trigger. So there is a two types of trigger. One is manual and another one is scheduled trigger. So here, when you configure this, like to run on every, say, as you can see, every minute you can run, every hour you can run, every day, month. So there's a frequency, right? And also you can change it to every say every 2 months or every 2 hours you can run. There are a lot of options and you can choose different time zones here. Okay, so that is the uh, that's where you can see a scheduling, and there are different scheduling options. So I don't want to confuse you at this moment. So let us consider this in detail in a further video regarding scheduling, right? And but basically this is where you create a any schedule, and then as you can see here, make sure start a trigger on creation. Okay, this option is checked. Okay, once this option is click OK, it will ask you the parameters also, because you have created a pipeline parameters, right? So you need to give proper pipeline parameters here. If it is an array, you need to give an array. If it is string, you need to give a string. Okay, so now as you can see, your trigger is created and it shows here. Okay, and you can make anytime you can pause it. Okay, if you want to pause the trigger, you can click on stop and click OK, and then publish it. So until and unless you publish it, your trigger will not be active. Please note that. So this is a very basic demo where I wanted to show. So what are the different options that we see, and what these are used for? And other thing is like how the pipeline is. What is a pipeline, right? This is a pipeline, and we can create multiple activities within the pipeline. So that is the whole agenda of this demo. But later in the further demos, we will see in detail about the data sets, okay, and how these data sets are linked to the pipeline, and how these data sets will use the link services in detail. So in the upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.